Hi all, I'm Louise Rumble, the founder of Open House. Welcome back for our third therapy workshop together. We are back at Fora at Soho in this amazing reading room. So first of all, a huge thank you to them for letting us be in this space with them. Founded in 2016, Fora is the tailored workspace that helps people to deliver their best work. The space marries style and function to drive productivity, inspiration, and collaboration. So, as we enter 2021 and we have a whole new year ahead of us, it's a fresh page before us, and there is no better time to ask yourself, what can I do differently this year? Anyone who has followed my journey to date will know that nearly 3 years ago now, I decided to go sober. And in today's workshop, we're going to discuss why sobriety might just change your life this year.
Hi, I'm Dr. Helene. I'm a clinical psychologist, and Louise and I have been working together for several months now. We thought it'd be a great opportunity to explore her sobriety journey and also hopefully help you to understand your relationship to alcohol or other drugs. Sometimes we aren't so sure about the level of our problems, so we're going to be thinking about that today, and I'll be asking Louise how she's overcome hurdles along the way. So what she says when people ask her about it, or if she has ever struggled to keep it up.
We've got loads of questions that have already come in from a Q&A that we did before the session. And there's a couple of other things that we're going to talk about, such as how to test sobriety and your own boundaries, how your relationships with those around you might change. And also, it's going to be a very positive, open forum discussion around all of the benefits that might come into your life that you didn't expect.
Great. So let's get started.
Perfect.
So Louise, I'm interested.
Just to remind everyone, if you want to put questions in the chat box as well, you can do that. That is on, and we will try and get through as many of them as we can. And if not, we will be sure to get back to you at a later date with some answers.
Great. Yes. Okay. So let's get started.
Perfect.
Louise, how are you feeling about entering into another year of sobriety?
So, honestly, I feel amazing. I try not to talk about it too much. I know it feels like I talk about it all the time, but really, yeah, it feels good. But also now it's just become a normal part of my life. Like, I don't think, oh, I'm entering into another year. I just think it's a new year, a new chance to do things, you know, grow further. I only really think about it when I come up to my anniversary, which is in March. So I'll be 3 years in March.
That's great. And you mentioned before that your sobriety is something that you're the most proud of in your life. Can you maybe explain to us why you're so happy about being sober?
Yeah, sure. So when I look back at my drinking journey, or not even drinking journey, just my life before I went sober, I find now that I can very clearly see that it was quite chaotic. I really felt like I was living on a roller coaster. I thought it was part and parcel of life, like work hard, play hard, dress up, go out, eat delivery on a hangover and do it again. But now when I look back, actually, I understand a bit better that it was more of an escapism route for me. So that's like the first point. The second point is that now I've started to face up to it, I can more easily admit that drinking got me into some really, really upsetting situations. There's obviously the main trigger event, which is the one that I talk about most. But just to be totally open and honest, it wasn't just that one thing. There were many things over the years, even from being much younger, situations that were just distressing, and I looking back, think would never have happened if there was no alcohol. So just very proud, because I feel like I've been able to successfully optimize and alter my life, that I have just removed additional pain. And so I just am happier and more balanced.
And I guess that's interesting when you say you've removed additional pain, because I assume that perhaps you were sometimes using drugs and alcohol to dampen pain or to numb it in some way.
Yeah, and I don't think that I ever did it consciously. So I never felt like I was desperate for a drink, or, oh, I really want to go out and, excuse my language, like get really messed up or fucked up. It was more that I think I was doing it inadvertently. So I think the pressure that I felt in my life of running a business and having a team and office and flying around the world, I think it was like a release almost, like taking the pot off the steaming kettle and let the pressure come out.
Yeah, I guess it must be hard to go from that high octane, fast pace of life to relaxing and going straight into sleep, or relaxing into hanging out with your friends. So perhaps drugs and alcohol helped smooth those transitions for you.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, the problem was really with, I would say, alcohol and sleeping pills. I made quite a conscious decision when I was younger that I didn't want to take drugs. Not even because it got me into any bad situations, just more because I felt like my mental health was so touch and go when I was younger that I really, like, the impacts that it had on me were really severe. So that was something that I parked pretty quickly. But the alcohol was something that was definitely like a lot more loose and just kept going. And yeah, like I said, I never went out to do it or to smooth into these situations and to release. It just, almost every time I would just have one or two and then another night gone.
Be a slippery slope.
Yeah, slippery slope.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting what you speak about, that you had an intuition, a sense that you were quite sensitive maybe to drugs, or they were just something to stay away from. And I think even with alcohol, some people, you know, it just isn't a problem for them. They maybe aren't relying on it for certain things. And other people, it just doesn't agree with them. Almost a bit like being a celiac, and it just doesn't agree with you to have, you know, gluten. Do you think that maybe there's something about how you respond to, like, substances, alcohol, that makes you a bit more sensitive to the effects of it?
I think, yes. I always used to say, oh my God, I get the worst hangovers ever. And then when I went sober, I realized, do you get the worst hangovers ever? Or do you actually just drink so much that hangover is worse than other people because you drunk more or you mix your drinks? So yeah, I would say that I am definitely sensitive to all of that. But for some reason, if I had to remove one of them, it should have been the alcohol, because I feel like alcohol really, really inhibits your decision-making in a way that maybe drugs do so differently. But I feel like with alcohol, people, or me, like, it got so sloppy and everything passed really quickly, and it just felt more messy and fluid. So yes, I think that I probably was quite sensitive to them, but actually I think everyone's sensitive to them, and I think, you know, everyone will become intoxicated if you take those substances. The severity of the hangover the next day, I'm sure there are some, you know, biological things that some people just don't experience it, but fundamentally, it was not good for me. Any kind of substances were just not good.
Yeah, and I guess what you've sort of explained there is maybe your physical responses to alcohol, and I think perhaps I was also referring to the perhaps emotional dependency or the habit of alcohol. Perhaps for some it's just easier for it to become a 5 nights a week type of thing, whereas for some people they can take it or leave it. And I wonder if for you it was something that really creeped into your life and started becoming a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think what people probably will find interesting about this is that even though I had a problem by the end of it, I never had a dependency on it at all. So I never drank during the week, and I never wanted to drink on the weekend. It's just something that just, crept in and went out of control. So I think that that's probably something that I'm very passionate about, is communicating to people, like, you don't have to be an addict or be dependent on something or be drinking it 5 nights a week in order for it to be a problem.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point, that you don't necessarily have to be a problem to want to elevate yourself and to want to maybe take a more positive direction in your life.
Just tapping back into the emotions question, because I realise that's the second time I've ignored it now. And it's really important that we touch on it because, like you said, the physical aftermath was bad, but it always passed. A day, 2 days, it would always pass. For me, it was the emotional roller coaster that came after it that was crippling. And I understand that for some people that doesn't happen. And I understand that it's because of my own history with some regrets that I had through what I went through at university and a situation where I was very heavily judged by cheating on my first ever boyfriend. I felt like after that I was so traumatized that I was doing everything within my capacity to keep everything together and not ever make the same mistake again. But then sometimes when I was drunk, I would make mistakes and I would do things that I didn't want to do. that I would never have done sober. And so I think that for me, it really triggered like a huge amount of shame and regret that maybe other people maybe didn't experience. So for me, it just became a very toxic cycle of not only feeling really unwell the next day, but also just feeling awful. Like, why did I do that? Like, why was I in that situation? I didn't even like that person, or why was I spending my time with those people, for example?
Yeah. And I can see how that would become a bit of a treadmill or a cycle. I think now would be a good time to kind of address the turning point. And I know a bit about Louise's story already, so I'm just going to advise a bit of viewer discretion. We're going to be talking a little bit about sort of uncomfortable sexual incident. So if you might be triggered by this, feel free to step away for a few minutes and come back in about 10 minutes while we discuss this. Yeah, so there was a bit of a turning point, wasn't it, when you decided enough's enough?
Yeah, there was. And actually, this is the first time I've ever spoken about it on camera. So it feels like I find it easier when we're just recording voice. It's funny how it's actually like bringing up it a bit more. But I just ended up one weekend, I went to a party, it was with a client. It just spiraled again. Lots of drinking, bar hopped, club hopped, a lot of them were my clients, so it was free drinks all along the way. And then ended up at about 5 a.m. in a situation where I was in a situation with a man, and I knew him. But I said to him, essentially, I don't want to do this with you. I don't want to be intimate with you. And I used the explicit words, please don't make me do this. I really don't want to do this. And for whatever reason, those boundaries and that, they were ignored. And that for me was an awful situation, because the next day I actually took a sleeping pill after it happened, and I literally just slept the whole day. And then when I woke up, it was dark outside, and I didn't know if it was the Saturday night or the Sunday night, or I didn't know. And yeah, I tried to ignore it for a while, but it really was like the trigger, the straw that broke the camel's back. I just like had this meltdown on a Monday morning at my spinning studio after getting off the bike, and it was just like this release where I just was like, I just can't, I can't keep going.
Yeah, so let's just take a breather there. So there's a lot to unpack. There's sort of how your lifestyle, was enabling that partying lifestyle, staying out till 5 a.m. So let's start from the beginning. So what was that very much part of your working life, was going out entertaining clients and that kind of thing?
No, not at all. So never entertained clients out. We just had some clients that were in the nightlife industry. So part and parcel, free dinners, free drinks. You get to know all the bartenders, the doorman, everyone there. It feels a bit like your extended family. Now we've gone through it a bit in therapy. I wonder if actually I was quite lonely whilst I was running my business. And because all I did was work, that actually on the weekends it was very easy just to continue in those cycles of work and distract from the loneliness. So yeah, it was definitely an enabling situation that I was in, for sure.
And I guess perhaps you're around like those partying friends that don't maybe tell you, slow down a bit, Louise, or maybe just you feel like you need to keep up with that hedonism and that pace of life because they're not sort of your best friends where you can just hang out with them without needing alcohol and drugs and...
Yeah, I just also think that it's probably interesting for people listening is that I don't feel like there were ever that many situations when my friends could have even sat me down and said, like, there's a real problem here. Because I don't think on a night out I was ever like super messy. I'd never be the girl that was like falling over or losing her shoes or being really drunk. So it was like I had it very under control.
Yeah.
So there was never really a time for someone to sit me down and be like, hey, I think you're probably drinking too much. How do you feel? I think from the outside, it just really looked like I had my stuff together.
Yeah.
Like worked really hard during the week, great shiny parties at the best places in London on the weekends, and just continue.
Yeah.
So I'd say it was more like the work situations that enabled me, or the clients that I had. I no longer, since going sober, have taken on any nightclubs or bars, just because it's a conscious decision that I don't want to do that anymore.
I think that's a really interesting point that you raised, because I have a lot of friends and clients who do work in that nightlife industry or the restaurant industry, and it becomes part and parcel of sort of working and socialising, and it can kind of normalise pretty high levels of alcohol.
It normalises it so much. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay, so going back to the night, so you were feeling like, well, you know, you were saying, I don't want to do this, don't make me do this.
Yeah.
What do you think it was about maybe being intoxicated that made you feel like out of control, or that message just wasn't landing?
I have quite a lot of big blanks, if I'm totally honest, and I understand since working with you that that's essentially like traumatic episodes can become blocked out from your memory. But from what I do remember, I think that if I had been sober, I would have just essentially been like, get off me, get up. I would have, or leave my house, like get up and leave, or I would have got up and left if it was somewhere else. But it almost just felt like I put my boundaries out there and they were then ignored, and then it was just like, it's that difficult point where your verbal boundaries maybe don't reflect like your physical, because you're in the situation, and when you're intoxicated, you're maybe like, do you know what I mean? You're just a bit out of it.
Yeah, a bit of like a dreamlike state.
Yeah, exactly. And I just don't, I don't really know. And it's taken me a long time to come to terms with, because I think that, and for a lot of people out there as well, like, you end up in situations when you're drunk and you blame the alcohol. And it's only really like in the last month or two since we've really been thinking and talking about sobriety that I'm like, no, like that person was in the wrong, because I explicitly stated my boundaries and they were ignored.
Yeah.
So yes, I could have drunk less, but because I was drunk, it does not mean that this was my fault.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you who've been in a similar situation where maybe you've blamed yourself because you were drunk, and maybe you thought, oh, well, if I wasn't drunk, I wouldn't have got myself in that situation, and those kinds of things, it does not mean that you're responsible. The perpetrator should not have taken advantage of you when you're in that state. They should also listen to your boundaries. And, you know, and it's just as a general rule, whenever we're engaging in these kind of intimate acts, it's really important to be checking in regularly. Are you okay with this step and this step and this step? And clearly, those boundaries were just being ignored repeatedly.
There were none. And also I think that it's only now that I'm sober and on my own personal development journey and starting to have more open conversations with men, and I'm not saying that it's just a male-female thing, I understand it can happen both ways. I don't think that in today's world there is enough open discussion around these lines of consent need to be discussed, and it should just be part and parcel of it being normal, not that anything is expected. I think in today's society it's, if you invite them back to your house, this is expected. Or if you go to this hotel room, this is expected. And actually, nothing should ever be expected of you. You can decide what decisions you want to make, what you feel comfortable with. And also another thing that I've spoken to a lot of females about since we released our first sobriety episode is that often people feel like once they start, they can't stop. They need to finish whatever they're doing. And that, I think, is a huge problem. And I think it's only since I've got older that if I'm not comfortable with something, I will just say, hey, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Whereas when I was younger, like, you don't have the confidence in your own voice, and you don't understand. Like, I think people are scared of, oh, he's going to tell, you know, when you're really young, he's going to tell everyone I'm frigid, or that's what, you know, you grow up with. And
yeah, and I guess it's possible that when you were intoxicated that night, maybe you felt like your confidence was lacking, maybe you felt like your voice just didn't have as much assertiveness behind it as maybe it would have if you'd have been really fully in control.
Yeah, I don't even really know. I don't really know how assertive I was, or how, I mean, I very clearly stated that I don't want to do this, but, and that's the problem, you know, you are intoxicated. Your memory is reduced, your control is reduced. It's a really, really tricky situation, and I think that's why I'm so passionate about us doing this, because if I can help even one person avoid the same situation by sharing this story, then it's 100% worth it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, I just want to say it's really brave of you actually to speak about this sort of deeply personal, and I think...
Oh, I'm getting upset.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
I guess also, even though, you know, you weren't to blame in any way, it can still be a shameful experience, an embarrassing one. So, yeah, I think it's just really brave that you're sharing it.
Thank you. And honestly, and to everyone at home, like I say this all the time, I wouldn't take it back. Like I would not take the situation back because it brought me to who I am today. It brought me to sobriety. It brought me to my life today. The only thing I wish I had done was potentially seek help sooner, just to work through it. I definitely buried it away. I didn't really talk about it. I only probably 3 to 5 people knew, if that, what had happened. And I think I also even really brushed over it when I told them the story.
Yeah.
It wasn't until they listened to the podcast that people were like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. So yeah, anyone out there that has gone through something similar, I just hope that you can know that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and seeking help and moving through it is really, really important, so it doesn't sit deep inside you forever.
Yeah. And so, staying with the incident, but moving forwards a bit, so the next day, or however long it was, did you know at that moment, right, enough's enough, or did you feel just lost for a while?
So I had this panic attack when I got off the spinning bike, and that was the moment when I was like, enough's enough. Mainly because I couldn't stop crying. I was actually hysterically crying. I remember I was like walking through the city of London from my spinning studio, and I was just like bawling my eyes out, and I was like on the phone to a friend, and then I called another friend, and I was like, I don't really know what to do. So that was the moment when I was like, enough's enough. But I never planned to just stop drinking totally. I just was like, whoa, I need a break.
Yeah.
So initially it was like a 30-day timeout. I was just like, whoa, we need to get you out of that club scene.
Hit the reset button.
Yeah, hit the reset button. And then once I stopped drinking, I just was like, wait, remind me why I even did that in the first place.
Yeah.
And then I started to realize like you can go out still. It just made no different. Like it just was so much better taking it away, basically.
Okay. So after what, a day or so, you were like, okay, 30 days of cutting this out. Yeah. Okay, amazing. And I think that brings us quite nicely onto kind of how to assess that you've got a problem that you might need to fix.
Yeah.
Because I think your situation is, a lot of us can relate to, of, yeah, I probably drink a bit too much. Sometimes situations get out of hand, but it's not a problem that I need to fix. So a lot of my clients, I think, sort of fit into one of 5 categories. So there's the sort of first category, which is, you know, they have the occasional drink, it's totally in moderation, and perhaps they want to give up just to be healthier, and yeah.
No real problem.
No real problem. And then we've got the next category, which is where maybe alcohol is used a little, alcohol or drugs is used a bit too much to relax, a spliff or glass of wine at the end of the day, you know, really leaning on it as a kind of reward. And then we move to sort of category 3, which is probably where you were for a little bit, where it just becomes kind of part of your life, perhaps drinking in excess, starting to get a little bit out of control, bothered by hangovers and that kind of thing. And then we enter into stage 4, which is where I think you got to and then turned it around.
Yeah. Yes.
So for me, I think that group 4 is where, you know, you might be going out and you might have some memory loss. You might get yourself in situations that you regret. You might start to have a dysfunctional relationship with alcohol where it becomes normal and your friends are all part of that scene.
That's like the more self-medicating category, isn't it? Where you use it to like reduce the pain or like escape a bit more.
Yeah, and maybe have that out-of-body experience. You know, a lot of people can't wait for the weekend, or they can't wait to meet up with that friend where they can get messed up with them.
Yeah.
And that's really starting to get quite dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And then the 5th category, I would say, is sort of full-blown addict, where maybe you're concealing it from loved ones, you're relying on it, maybe you're taking cocaine at work, or, it's sort of
True dependency.
True dependency. And definitely if you feel you're in stage 5, I would really recommend getting some professional help, speaking to your GP and dealing with the problem urgently.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I love those stages. I feel like, and we've linked it in the worksheet, but I think understanding substance use on a sliding scale is amazing, because people in today's society either think they have a problem or they don't. But actually, there's so many different areas between that. Love the 5 stages.
And everyone can benefit, so even if you identify as being in stage 1, but you're looking to get a bit fitter and a bit leaner and cleaner and have better mental acuity, there still can be huge benefits of being sober. What we've done is linked a questionnaire on the worksheet so that you can get a more objective view of your alcohol or drug use. Might just give you a bit of a benchmark.
Yeah, I definitely had no way to gauge. I honestly just thought it was normal. I thought it was normal to just party hard and whatnot. So I think that hopefully that questionnaire might be helpful for some of you. I think it's really quick, like 12 questions or short form questionnaire. Just might help give you a bit more awareness and understanding, because I think a lot of us just work on unconscious, just repeating the same cycles. So sometimes a bit of awareness is needed to break the cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you touched on being in that kind of, that industry of bars and nightclubs, but also, students, like freshers that are drinking way too much. You might find that you're with a whole bunch of friends that are drinking every night, maybe drinking a bottle of wine as pre-lash. Just because other people are doing it, it doesn't mean that it's healthy or that it's healthy for you. So
I actually could not even imagine my university career without alcohol. And that literally is sad, isn't it? That the entire experience was just based on substances. And if I could go back and do the whole thing again, honestly, I just never start drinking.
Yeah.
Sounds a bit extreme, but I just feel like it would be so interesting to see how my life would have panned out without them, without any substances. It would be interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's very ingrained into the sort of British student culture and
culture generally.
Yeah, and students who don't drink sometimes really struggle to find their place in that. But luckily, the UK is following the US's lead and starting to introduce some alcohol-free halls of residence and, starting to encourage and support students not to indulge in binge drinking and drug use.
And I love it as well, because even in 3 years, I have seen the change of how weird it was 3 years ago for me to say, oh, I don't drink. Everyone just assumed I was an addict, that I'd come out of AA.
Or pregnant.
Well, I didn't really get that one.
No? Okay, because you're out in the nightclubs.
Yeah, because I'm in the nightclubs, exactly.
Okay.
And yeah, whereas now it's a movement that's growing, and I'm so excited that in a couple of years' time it will be so normal here. When I lived in LA, it was so normal. People were like, oh, cool, are you microdosing mushrooms instead? And I was like, no.
Just being sober.
Just sober, but it was just really normal. No one ever even asked why you don't drink over there. They'd just be like, cool, what can I get? It was good.
Yeah.
So I think that will happen here. So if you feel like you're going against the grain, you are to an extent. But I really think that it's just going to continue to get easier and easier. So it might be a good time to start now.
Absolutely. And I've recently been reading the Russell Brand recovery book. And I appreciate Russell Brand is, maybe not everyone likes him, but I think that the popularity and the success of his book is partly because as a nation we're ready to receive his message, and also because it's a bloody good book.
It is the book that literally changed my life. I found it. It's called Freedom from Our Addictions by Russell Brand. It is the one thing I would advise to anyone considering sobriety. It changed my life. It has an entire self-help program that you can go through. It's also funny. It's not serious. It's like a great way. I think, his first question is like, are you a bit fucked up? And the second one's like, do you want to be a bit less fucked up? He takes the 12 steps, doesn't he? And he writes them.
Yeah.
I love that.
So that was one thing that we both really liked from his book was the 12-step program is a very universal and very effective way of dealing with substance misuse. But the way that they're written can put some people off because most of the steps include mention of God and, believing in a higher power. So for some people that just might not resonate with them. And what we really liked about the Russell Brand book was that he rewrote them with plenty of swear words, but he rewrote them in a way that resonated with him. So what we've put in the worksheet as an exercise for you at home is to have a look at the 12 steps, have a look at the Russell Brand example, and perhaps write your own steps, your own commitments to yourself for how you're going to attack sobriety, if that's what you choose to do.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that for me, it was like acknowledging the connection between why I was doing what I was doing, setting out why I don't want to do that anymore, and then looking forward. Because when I don't do this anymore, this is what I'm going to get. So that would kind of be like the structure of my steps.
And one thing that I find really interesting about the steps is that it does touch on spirituality. So in my clinical work, a lot of people have existential crises and thoughts about, well, what is the point in life?
I'm only laughing because I'm like, I'm there all the time.
What is the point in life? And so in order to maybe sort of numb some dissatisfaction, we might turn to excessive drinking. And one thing that I think helps a lot of people hoping to pursue sobriety is finding their purpose, their meaning, their
bigger picture.
The bigger picture. And I was wondering for you if you've been on a bit of a spiritual journey with sobriety.
Yeah, massively. I mean, I think I've just been on a spiritual journey really my whole life. And it's really picked up speed in the last few years. For me, I feel like I have always believed in there being a bigger power and something bigger than ourselves and something greater than ourselves. But if I didn't believe in that, I understand why people say, well, what's the point? Like, we're just going to live and then we die and I'm just going to drink and smoke and take drugs. Whereas having a purpose, and for me, even Open House is an example of that. Like, I want to connect with people and help people. It feels great. It gives me a purpose. And, compare that and the reward that I would get from doing that, or when people message me saying that episode did X, Y, Z to me, or it changed my life, versus spending the time that I spend on Open House in a nightclub. It's just a no-brainer for me. Don't get me wrong. I know how fun drinking can be. Like, I don't want people to think that I am not acknowledging that, because I have drunk my whole life. I have partied so hard. I think that's another reason why I can give it up. It's like, I've done it. Not all, but like I've really, I feel like I've really done the partying, and a belief in something bigger and trusting that you can move forward and really do something with meaning. I think is important. I think the existential crisis thing is difficult because I get my answer from spirituality, which is that there's a journey, everyone's here for a reason. If I didn't have that, it would definitely be more difficult.
Yeah, and I think, though, that therapy can actually really help with understanding what your purpose in life might be. Because I fundamentally believe that we're all here for a reason. We all have something to offer. We can help each other and leave our mark. But particularly if you're feeling depressed, particularly if you're hollowed out maybe by excessive substance use, it can be so difficult to think about how you might be helpful to anybody.
Even generally, without the substances, like even until last year, or actually I think even before I started Open House, I don't think I knew what my purpose was. I'm still not even really sure what it is exactly, but I know I'm definitely moving in the right way. But before that, all I did was work and travel and party. They're not very purposeful activities. So I agree. Yeah, I didn't realise that was something you could explore in therapy.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
really awesome.
I mean, the realistically, you may not manage to get an NHS referral to explore what your meaning is in life, but absolutely, you could have just a few sessions with a psychologist, even a life coach, even a spiritual
advisor.
Exactly, to find out what it is that you need to be doing.
Or maybe we'll do a workshop on on life purpose.
Maybe,
There we go,
yeah.
we can help everyone.
Definitely, because the pull and the power of alcohol and substances is very great. And you need to find something that is of
Equal pull.
equal or greater pull.
Yeah, greater. Greater, much greater.
You know, to keep you in the right direction. And this is something that Russell speaks about a lot. And it does require you to look at your demons, look at your flaws, be open to looking at them and be ready to doing that.
Yeah, 100%. I think that is one of the biggest things I've taken from sobriety, is that you have to build a life a life and a personality that you really like, that you don't need to escape from. And I don't think that I had that until I started on this sobriety journey. And I think that there's a lot of work we all need to do. And it's only when we start doing that we can really be like, I'm good. I'm comfortable to sit with who I am and the decisions I'm making and be grateful and happy with that. I think a lot of the time we're just distracting and avoiding.
And I think from clients who relapse from time to time, it's because they feel overwhelmed. So there'll be an event and they'll think, I can't cope with this, or their mood will dip to a point that they think, I can't cope with this. And that's why it's really important to get help, because the reality is maybe it is too much for you to manage at that time. But the chances are you're never going to find the answer in a bottle, in a pill,
Yeah, never.
in a line of Coke. You're going to find it by looking at it and getting help with it.
I agree.
Okay, so I think we now are going to move on to kind of the practical sides of being sober and what the reality's been for the last 3 years for you.
Sounds good.
I'm really interested, we've kind of been touching on it, but on what your identity was maybe before and if it's changed now.
Yeah, I think that my identity before was very tied to external metrics. So what other people thought of me, how I looked, the job that I did, how much money I was making, how much I was able to travel, living that like horror, hate labeling it as this, but like the Instagram lifestyle. I think fundamentally, I think I was always a really nice, kind person underneath it, but I think it was like overshadowed by all these other things. And now I think that now I've taken this, the sobriety has given me an identity that comes from within. It's like, who do I want to be and who do I want to show up as every day? Because I think that, and this is quite like a deep thing to say, but I think that when you drink or you take substances, there's two versions of you. It's almost like your mask and then your real you. You turn into like party girl Louise and then you gets left at home. But I don't have the two versions of me anymore. It's more like, this is me. I show up as the same person every day, no matter what situation I'm in, no matter what people I'm in. So I think my identity has become clearer, more clear.
I guess what you're also describing is some more consistency in your personality.
So much consistency.
Yeah, and you know, this is something that comes up a lot in my work, is the almost like the boom and bust cycle, the change. So, you know, you might give it all on a night out and you'll be the life and soul of the party, and then you'll crash the next day because you're having the hangover, the come down.
Massively.
And in those moments of despair, you've got to pick up the pieces and then potentially use the substances to go back up. You know, maybe as fun as those highs are, maybe on balance, it's more healthy to just stay consistent and to give your mental health a chance.
Oh, my life is so much more consistent. So much more consistent. And I think that's why I have been so much happier recently than I ever was before. Because life is quite predictable for me now. Like, I don't make bad decisions. I'm in control of my schedule. Like, it's just nice and balanced, and I take such gratitude in like being up at 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I'll clean the house and then I'll go to a spinning class and then I'll grab a juice. Before, I could never plan things on the weekend. You never knew what was going to happen. So yes, I might not get those like exhilarating highs. And sometimes I will be like, feel a bit bored with life. And I think that's probably quite a good thing for me to admit, is that it's not all like happy clappy. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I do miss like just going out on a really big night out. But on balance, it's not worth it. Like will always pick like, well, I mean, I'm never like that. I'm still like this, but like down here, whereas before it was like,
Yeah. And actually, this is making me think a little bit about brain development.
Yeah.
So at a time when we're likely to be drinking a lot, so sort of towards the end of school, going into uni and beyond, is also a time where our neural circuitry is designed to be reward sensitive. So we're going to be looking for those hedonistic experiences, that social connection. It's going to feel really, really rewarding, but the prefrontal cortex of our brain, or kind of the more analytical and practical side, isn't going to be as developed, because that develops last and it finishes developing when you're about 25.
That blows my mind. Your brain doesn't develop fully until you're 25.
Yeah.
I look back at all the things I did between like 16 and 25 and I'm like, oh, no wonder you made some really bad decisions. Like your brain wasn't really properly functioning at that point.
So, you know, we are rewarded more highly by those fun experiences, and we're also more likely to take risks. And that's why sort of across time, adolescence and early adulthood is a time for a lot of accidental deaths, because, you know, we're just sort of carefree.
It's not good.
But as fun as it is, this time also marks a time for the first episode of anxiety, depression, OCD. So most commonly you're going to be experiencing those first episodes in your late adolescence and early adulthood. So really important to think about what's important to you. Is it mental health or is it transient highs? Which sounds boring, but...
Yeah, it's just really important.
Yeah, what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else so we've spoken a bit about that consistency that you've gained through sobriety. What else have you gained from cutting alcohol?
I would say that I've gained much deeper connections with people around me. I've learned that true human connection happens when there are two non-intoxicated people consciously entering into a discussion, exploring a topic, sharing experiences, sharing emotions. That's when the bond deepens. And yes, it's so fun to be out with your friends. And I know that to some extent, I'm sure that those experiences also deepen bonds. But I think that it's just helped me like level up in terms of the people I'm surrounding myself by. And I think that's part of why I'm so consistent now, is that I only have these like really wonderful people around me. I don't have people that make me do bad things or that tempt me to, you know, if I had a friend that was trying to make me drink or take drugs, they wouldn't be my friend by the next day. Like it has allowed me to judge how other people are, and I just think that the quality of the people I've surrounded myself with has become elevated, and it's just really nice. They're really reliable, really kind people.
So are you saying that maybe over time you've had to let go and cut loose some friends that haven't been healthy for you?
I definitely don't think that I ever even really had like a party set of friends that I had to let go. And I'm sure a lot of people listening, that this might be one of the things that you feel worried about, is that you maybe feel like in order to go sober, you're gonna be losing your friendship group. But I guess I want to say to you that doesn't have to be the case. You need to understand that you can change the dynamics of that group. And for me, I just changed the way that I hung out with these people, and I would meet for dinner and breakfast. We'd go to the gym together. We'd go for walks together. Now, I know that works because obviously the people aren't like big partiers. And I can imagine that if they were like huge ravers and everyone raved and partied all the time, it might be a different situation. So do you have any advice for anyone who is really, their whole network is like surrounded by enablers?
Yeah, so I do. I think eventually, you know, life will find its new normal and you'll be surrounded by a group of friends that are wholesome and that support your sobriety journey. But I think we have to be realistic that sometimes you might be needing to cut loose your best friend who you take ketamine with. And that, you know, it might just be that in order for you to take control over your life, you need to let some people go.
Because it's quite triggering for some people, isn't it? Like,
of course.
I find it very interesting when I say, when people say, do you want a drink? And I can judge their reaction. I can really see who it triggers. And the people that are like, oh, why? That's so boring. How do you have fun? Like all this stuff. And I'm just like, oh, like you are all, that is like so, that reaction for me is just like not, but I can imagine that if that was your best friend or those are the people surrounded you by and people were peer pressuring you to continue to do it, that maybe it just has to take like a really big decision.
Yes. Well, sometimes your decision to go sober or you thinking about it can make those around you feel a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
People have this subconscious desire to maintain the status quo and they might try to hold you back. And that's something to be aware of and prepared to do. I think that where it's tricky is where it's like your real best friends, because you will become comfortable with drinking too much or smoking too much, because they'll be enabling it.
Yeah.
But you know, if you feel that the time is right to pursue sobriety, then that's, you just have to dig deep and just know that take each step, each day at a time.
I think that's interesting as well, because I feel like I always look at it as a threshold, that like the more I was drinking was almost like the less I respected myself. Less I respected my body, the less I just didn't care so much for myself. And then when I got to a point where I was like, I don't want to be this version and I want to love myself and I want to look after my body, when that took over the drinking, it was like the self-worth and self-love like just can drive the decision. So I think that it probably does come, it has to come from you. No one can stop you drinking or stopping taking drugs other than you. And I hope that you can take away from this that you are worthy of living a life without substances. You are worthy to be loved for who you are, deep down, with no performative masks and no substances numbing and covering everything up. Like you are worthy underneath that. And once you start to really lean into that and kind of work on that self-worth and self-love piece, you can just realize like, yeah, actually, I'm going to do this. And I don't care what you think, because I am doing this for me, because I'm worthy of it.
Absolutely. But I think for most people with a significant problem, it's nearly impossible to do it alone. And I was just wondering whether you got any help or considered some external help to support your sobriety.
So I didn't, purely because on that sliding scale that we discussed, I still to this day don't classify myself as an addict. I never drank on my own. I never would drink in the day. I never would drink. I mean, I didn't have a dependency. Yes, it was a problem in terms of the repercussions, but it didn't interrupt with my day-to-day functioning. So I never thought it was appropriate to seek professional help. I've got friends that have invited me to AA meetings and stuff, and sometimes I was kind of curious. I was like, oh, I might just go to see what's happening, but I never did. So I did do it on my own, and I honestly just knew that I had both the intelligence and the willpower to read into what was going on, to understand it, and then just put the actions into place. But I also understand that if you are further up the scale, it increases the likelihood that you need professional help. And so I don't want people to think that just because I did this on my own is how it should be for anyone else. Because I have a friend who's a recovery coach. He's gone through AA, he's gone through NA, and he says it's absolutely like nuts that I've done it on my own, and he just would never, ever recommend it. So yeah, I'm very pro seeking help in whatever capacity that is, and please share your journey with people so you don't have to like bear the load of it all on your own.
I think, that's good. And, you know, maybe you don't feel ready yet to be part of an AA community and commit wholly to that way of life. Maybe you don't feel it's got serious enough, but there are things you can do to begin with, you know, reading books, perhaps going on a retreat, like a spiritual or a therapy type of retreat, which is something that, that you tried. So just something to support you during this, you know, relatively big life transition.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think, although I've got lots more questions, perhaps we should turn to the questions that we've got submitted.
Yes, sure. Should we see what's come in as well?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. We've got lots. We love talking about sobriety because everyone always asks lots of questions. Okay. I'm not going to say her name, but I love my boyfriend, but I just can't ignore his problem with drugs. He's really not ready to address it, but I just don't think I can go on. What should I do? I'm 35 and I'm desperate to settle down and have a family, and I just am so stuck.
Yeah.
It must be really difficult.
That is really difficult. So I guess what's tricky is that it sounds like you're aware that his problem with drugs might be rooted in something deeper, maybe a depression, an addiction or something. So you want to be there to support him. I think your partner has to feel ready to make these changes himself or herself. Is it a man or a woman?
It doesn't matter whichever one it is.
Yeah. Yeah, your partner needs to be ready, and you need to decide for yourself how long you're going to stay in that position. You know, if you really want to settle down and have a family, and if you're a woman, there's a biological clock, there's things that you want to achieve, and you might be better at supporting your partner as a friend or from a distance. You can't tell them what to do, but you can support them with pointing them in the right direction, telling them to go to their GP, maybe checking out the Frank website for some local services. There are even some charities and private organisations as well to support people. So, you know, try and organise that professional help, but ultimately, if your partner's not ready and you want to move on with your life, it might just be the necessary step that you need to take in order to help your partner as well realise that it's a problem.
Yeah, I agree. That must be really difficult, particularly when you're also considering like the father of your child and the childhood that the child will have. It must be tricky. Yeah. But yeah, I hope that, you know, that whatever lies ahead, that you kind of are respecting you and your potential future family in terms of like setting the foundations for the most sort of happy future possible.
Yeah.
Okay, this one's good because I feel like this covers a lot of people. I party in moderation, take drinks, plural, okay, and drugs, but have no real negative repercussions. I would like to consider giving up, but I just don't really have any incentive to. Do you have any advice? Can I take this one? So for me, I would say two things. One, don't look at it as a sacrifice. You have to see it as being like the most amazing addition to your life ever. But I also say to people that if you don't even think you have any kind of problem with it at all, we often forget like the health implications of drinking and taking drugs. And they're actually something that like are never really spoken about. And I've read some crazy statistics about how alcohol increases the permeability of your gut, which means makes your body more permeable to toxins released from your gut into your body. And alcohol breaks down bacteria and feeds them in the stomach, which then metabolizes into a carcinogen and prevents nutrients being absorbed. I'm sure there's lots of things in terms of the brain that it does, which I don't have the qualifications to talk about. But I would definitely say that if it's something that you're looking to explore, but you don't have the incentive, have a look into the health benefits as well. I have to say that I feel great since not drinking, and I definitely think that my overall health and vitality's got a lot better. So that could be one option.
Yeah, and I was also thinking about my clinical work. So, you know, I have a lot of debates with my clients about, for example, cannabis use. They say, well, it's the most effective anti-anxiety medication or pain relief medication that I know. And I am not here to judge anybody. If you have found something that really, truly works for you, then by all means, carry on. But just be really honest with yourself about...
Is that an excuse?
Well, exactly. You know, so if cannabis is the best anti-anxiety medication that you've found, why not maybe focus a little bit on dealing with the anxiety to begin with, rather than needing an external thing? I'm going to self-disclose a bit with my brother, but my brother was working in palliative care, so end-of-life care, and I think he was just finding it really stressful, but not speaking about it too much, and so started maybe drinking a little bit, maybe smoking a bit of weed, in order just to get through it. And it was only when his wife started saying, what are you doing? Your behaviour's changed, that he started to think actually about the emotional impact of the work. And once he did that, he didn't really have need for this coping mechanism.
I think that's such a good point, is that people often think that the substance is the problem, but there's almost always something underneath the substance that's like driving the problem. So yeah, going deeper into that.
Could all do with looking at our demons and our
We could.
foibles.
I look at my demons a lot. I'm very familiar with them. Okay, right. This is a good one too. Not one that I can directly relate to myself, but I think is a very valid question. So I might hand it over to you.
Okay.
I'm just too shy to date without alcohol. What do I do?
Yeah, it is tricky because, you know, I'm very aware that modern day dating will involve, you know, going to a bar, maybe after work, and not really eating and just getting drunk. And
that actually just like triggers me even thinking about the straight to the bar, no food days. Like, not good. Not good.
You know, so it is a little bit, or at least pre-COVID, was part of our culture and the way we would date. But I think that, again, it's about tackling the shyness and not necessarily... so maybe setting yourself 1 or 2 drink limit and just trying to prepare yourself for feeling confident. There are a few ways you can do this. You can seek some therapy to try and improve your low self-esteem. Some people also do like positive affirmations and some journaling as well to try and boost their self-esteem and their shyness. And the other thing is, and perhaps the most important, is the more you put yourself out there, the greater your comfort zone is going to become, and just the more confident you're going to feel. So rather than running away through using alcohol, face your demons, push yourself, and hopefully automatically you're going to start feeling more confident.
Also, I think, for what it's worth, my tip on this would be, when I look at people dating today, I see them meeting in a bar, not eating, and then the date starts at 7 or 8, whatever, and they've got the whole night ahead of them. So it's like, it's just inevitable that the date... And in fact, years ago, I went on a date with someone where the guy got so drunk that he was like throwing things out of his bag trying to find his wallet, and I just was like, this is so unattractive. Like, I don't want to say where we were in case he's listening to this, but it was just so embarrassing, and the waiter was just stood there looking at him, and I was just looking at him, and I was like, oh my God, this is bad. But it was like late in the night, right? So what I would say is, like, don't give yourself 7 hours ahead, because it's very nerve-wracking going into something knowing there's no end, right? So you want to be more drunk so you can go into it. But actually, why not meet for a quick coffee? Say, like, I've got 30 minutes or I've got an hour, like, would love to go for a coffee, walk in the park, etc., etc. Because there's a fixed time on it. So, like, the very worst that's going to happen, and I know this probably won't make you feel better, is that you're just going to have, like, an awful hour, but then it's done. And it's not, like, a whole evening ahead of you. So maybe, like, doing something smaller, less overwhelming could be easier.
Yes, and also I think that over time we can see people, you know, with our beer goggles on, and we might think that they're amazing, but when we're sober, we realise
they are not.
Not that amazing.
No, that is true though, and I say to people as well that I think that dating sober is great, because you know very quickly, very quickly, if this is someone you want to see again or not.
Absolutely. And I would say, if you're using online dating, put in your profile, I don't drink, I've chosen sobriety, or whatever. Or
be proud of it.
Sometimes there are little tick boxes as well. So
and ask them their star sign before you meet as well. Just check that, and that'll be easy.
I'm not sure that's in the evidence base, but okay. But if don't wait to have the awkward conversation there. Just set it out from the beginning, and then you can just relax into it, knowing that he's okay with that, or she.
Yeah, like if they say, oh, let's meet for a drink, you can just be like, oh, I actually don't drink, but that sounds good, like meet you there at 9 or 8, whatever, and you can just grab a lemonade or whatever.
Yes.
I think just own your decision. It's nothing to be ashamed of. I'm so proud of it, and I think if that's the mentality you go into it with, then it's just changes the dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. And have your go-to alcohol-free drink, or at least a few of them, so that you don't panic order.
Yeah. Okay, another question.
Yeah.
Very keen to try this, but just don't know what to say on a night out. Have you got any tips or tricks for boundary setting? So I think this ties back to what we've just said about like just own it. So I would always just say, oh, I don't drink, thank you, can I just grab a Diet Coke or whatever? So just very clearly say, you don't need to make excuses. Some people won't even ask why you don't drink. If they do, and people say, oh, that's weird, why do you do that? Or, oh, have you got a problem? Like, oh, are you an addict? I think that it depends how much you want to give away. And you know, it's only in the last month that I've started talking more openly about my experience. But I think you can just say, I much prefer myself and my life when I don't drink, so I've just decided to make a lifestyle change.
Yeah.
And if anyone can go against that, and you saying that you're a better person and you're happier, then I just don't. I think that's very telling.
Absolutely. And I would also say that, you know, given this kind of corona pandemic time, there aren't huge parties going on at the moment. So take it as an opportunity to do a trial run, to maybe get a month of sobriety under your belt so that when perhaps life one day returns to normal, you've already got some months behind your belt and you might not feel like sabotaging them by just drinking again and going back to your old self.
Yeah. I agree, and I actually find that the more time you have under your belt, the even easier it becomes. Because if it's just a week, it's quite easy to break again. But when you start to get into a month, a quarter, half a year territory, you're like, wow, yeah, this really works for me, and I don't want to break it now.
Yeah.
We've got loads more questions, but I think sadly we probably have to wrap up now. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say one final thing. So through our therapy journey, you know, you probably did have to let go of an old identity, an identity that worked hard, played hard. But I think you came to realise that that identity, whilst it was familiar, wasn't kind of the best one for you.
Or my true self.
Your true self. And I think that your sobriety journey has brought you so many unexpected things. It's brought you open house. It's brought you maybe purer social connections. So there are going to be losses with changing your direction, but hopefully you'll find, or people watching will find like a purer path.
Yeah, and gains, huge gains, huge gains. Like I can't tell you how much I just think sobriety is the most amazing thing, and I just hope that some people watching this may get to experience what I've experienced. I truly think it's magical and life-changing, and I just couldn't endorse it.
And it hasn't been a sacrifice, has it?
It hasn't. It's been the best gain, the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
I can't say it louder, shout it from the rooftops more. Honestly, I just am so excited for more people to explore it and hopefully go down this path.
Oh, well, thank you, Louise. And to everyone, wishing you a very happy 2021.
Yes. Oh, I just got goosebumps.
Great new year.
Yeah, it's going to be an amazing year. And thank you so much for tuning in. We are so grateful that you're on this journey with us. We've got so many exciting things planned this year. And we are here to help you thrive, not just survive. So we will see you very soon.
Take care.
Bye.